Hello, Generic Drug Forum attendees. It's a pleasure to spend some time with you to share my thoughts on this topic, Integrated Manufacturing Assessment, Review Expectations. My name is Vidya Pai, and I'm a branch chief within Office of Pharmaceutical Manufacturing Assessment, OPMA, OPQ. Through my talk today, I hope to illustrate typical approaches to resolve common process deficiencies encountered in generic drug application review, and share tips to reduce review cycles through effective responses to these deficiencies. So, focusing on integrated manufacturing assessment, the goal is to evaluate manufacturing and testing processes for the proposed commercial process and product to ensure that it is robustly designed and capable of delivering consistent product quality and performance over the life cycle. My colleagues that are OPMA reviewers evaluate process, facility, and microbiology aspects using a holistic, risk-based approach. We do this in collaboration with our colleagues, DMF staff, product reviewers, biopharmacists, as well as field investigators. Through the next 20 minutes or so, I hope that in addition to some technical useful content, I can give you a glimpse into the mindset of a reviewer. Most of us started in industry, so we're familiar with the same operations as you are. However, in our role as reviewers, we look at the information in an application, but with a slightly different lens. To elaborate, our assessment is bounded by regulatory considerations as outlined within law, regulation, rule, guidance, compendia, policy, and procedures. Additionally, we do make extensive use of the ICH quality guidelines to allow us to make risk and science-based decisions, as well as provide robust CMC assessments. Just to refresh, ICH Q8 and Q11 focus on the early stages of product life cycle and emphasize product and process understanding. Q9 gives us a framework of risk and risk management. Q10 gives us insight into design of an effective pharmaceutical quality system. And Q12 addresses the commercial phase of the product life cycle. So we're going to take a little detour, and I'm going to share these two pictographs on the slide that summarize our initial foray into trying to trend deficiencies. This was a study done by a summer student last year. It spanned across 400 applications and deficiencies sent over a period of 18 months, primarily for liquid dosage forms. And what we tried to map out, and what you can see in this slide, is really try to understand grouping of deficiencies by categories, both application related as well as unit operation related, and see if there was a preponderance of deficiencies in a particular area. And once we did that, we dug a little bit deeper and we tried to understand within a given category whether the deficiency is related to specific concepts, for example, process controls, CPPs, IPCs. And what I will say is, even though this is really preliminary, just trying to put a context on this, it appears to me, at least, that the deficiencies really are arising from occasional gaps in adhering to our tried and true development framework. So let's revisit that framework again. This framework for product development, design, and process understanding outlined within ICH Q8 really starts with the driver of understanding the product with regards to its quality, safety, efficacy, performance. And from there, drawing on critical quality attributes that product design, formulation, and the process has to deliver. Thereafter, there is an assessment of risk and a pressure testing of sources of variation as part of development studies that underlie the selection of the manufacturing process. Last but not the least, to allow for robust implementation of the manufacturing process, a control strategy that will work at scale needs to be identified, along with the relevant critical process parameters and in-process controls. So really, what our framework is suggesting is that our assessment should span across the inputs, the critical material attributes, the process parameter ranges, and the variability in both, and understand the impact they may have on the critical quality attributes of the finished product. So through a combination of risk assessment, development studies, and justified material formulation and process choices, the application information is intended to demonstrate and establish capability to manufacture a product with defined quality parameters over time, and provide assurance that scale up to the commercial scale and is achievable and will deliver comparable quality as the clinical batches or the bio batches. So, in the context of this framework, what would be areas to highlight with regards to expectations, review expectations? So I'm going to take the approach of speaking to this in terms of deficiencies and trying to elaborate on why they were sent, and then elaborate a little bit with regards to considerations that you may want to include as part of your response, which provide information on the how and what, how the risk was mitigated, or what controls may be in place. So let's start with the first one. So one of the expectations would be that there is due consideration given to critical material attributes. So a deficiency was sent out for a highly hygroscopic active which was being dispensed. However, the amount dispensed did not account for purity of the active. Considering the hygroscopicity, there was potential for moisture increase and therefore decrease in assay during storage, handling, or dispensing. The reviewer was seeking additional controls as well as advising the sponsor to revise the batch recipe to account for purity of the active. So some of the thoughts you may want to keep in mind would be to provide information in a multi-pronged approach. You could start by adjusting for purity. You could provide assurance that additional testing is being done for water content at the time of use, and moreover, appropriate environmental controls are in place that ensure humidity and inertness so that the product continues to be protected. Another expectation is really to give due thought to criticality of in-process controls, especially in the light of critical quality attributes of the finished drug product. So this deficiency was sent out for a lotion drug product that contained 0.1% of a poorly soluble active dispersed into a lotion base. Considering the low drug content and the suspended active, the reviewer was seeking additional assurance around dispersed particle size distribution and tests for viscosity and globule size. So one way to think about this is that as these attributes were identified as CQAs for the finished drug product, as part of manufacturing, it would be anticipated that attention has been brought to bear on whether these attributes need to be measured at the end of a significant phase of manufacturing. For example, viscosity and globule size can impact lotion performance as well as delivery characteristics. Changes in particle size, shape, habit, or aggregation may require monitoring to allow for batch-to-batch consistency. So you may want to elaborate on how these risks were managed as part of your response, and moreover, not just at one point in the bulk solution. You may also want to keep in mind that there may be a need to demonstrate homogeneity of such attributes across the bulk. Another expectation is really around development studies and their representativeness. And I will illustrate this through two examples. This particular deficiency was sent out and it related to information that was submitted with regards to compatibility studies for a disc filter when a cartridge filter of a much larger size was in use for commercial manufacturing. The reviewer sought comparisons with regards to surface area to volume ratio to establish that the assessment was taking into account worst case conditions. So as part of your response, you may consider providing clear and explicit information to correlate the tested filter with the proposed filter by calculating surface area to volume ratios. You could also provide calculations, as well as may also rely on additional compatibility studies using the full-scale filter. And keep in mind that the test filter should have been treated the same way as one used for routine production. Another example here about representativeness relates to that of whole time studies. In this case, a deficiency was sent for a whole time study for a granular intermediate being held in IBCs. The ask was about trying to establish that appropriate sampling was being done to mitigate risks around segregation, as well as appropriate storage conditions were in use. And in your response, you may choose to provide data with appropriate level of sampling from either exhibit batches or additional studies you may have done. One thing to keep in mind with regards to whole time studies is that as this is a pause in manufacturing, it would help us to have tabulated information that provides ranges for each whole time, should there be one, between significant manufacturing stages. So we're going to take a little pause and go to a challenge question. The challenge question talks about a product that contains 45% organic solvent, and an information request was sent out seeking extractable leachable studies to support suitability of the manufacturing contact surfaces. So what should your response include? A, studies per principles outlined in 1663-64, cleaning protocols for equipment, data to show impurities in finished drug product are within acceptance limits, certification from organic solvent vendor that it is suitable for pharmaceutical use. Give you 2 minutes there, or rather maybe 5 seconds, sorry. Yes, this would be the option you would choose. So not only should your development studies be representative, they should also have appropriate design and be conducted according to compendial guidelines, should any exist. And what I would encourage you to do is, as many applications are getting information requests related to this topic, to circle back to a prior presentation in this forum on this topic. For the next 2 or 3 examples, I will speak towards equipment characteristics or deficiencies related to equipment. So one expectation is that appropriate assessment of sources of variability be conducted. In this case, a deficiency was sent because scale-up was proposed, commercial equipment was identified. However, there was a footnote indicating equivalent validated equipment could be used for key unit operations. And this provoked the reviewer to think about whether the equivalent validated equipment would be the same principle, design, and materials of construction. So as part of your response, you could elaborate on this topic. You could also provide development studies that assess the impact of equipment variation on process parameters. You could provide information on scale-dependent and scale-independent parameters and how the ranges may need to be adjusted based on scientific data and rationale as you move forward to implement any changes to equipment. So another expectation is that the equipment capability be understood and reflected as part of your proposed commercialization plan. In this case, a deficiency was sent because exhibit batches were being manufactured at a fixed speed, whereas commercial batches were to be manufactured at a much wider range beyond that fixed speed that the exhibit batches had used. So the reviewer's concern was whether the fill weight range, which is a CQA for the finished product in the vial, could be met with accuracy across the proposed commercial fill speeds and across the entire filling duration. So as part of your response, you could choose to provide an assessment of the impact of changes in process parameter ranges on the proposed fill weight and accuracy. You may also have information from equipment qualification or PPQ that provide information on this topic, and that could be included. Moreover, based on product characteristics and risk, you could also propose to conduct additional enhanced in-process sampling, especially, say, for the validation batches, and include that as part of your controls within P3.4. So last but not the least, speaking towards process validation, we often see process validation protocols and reports submitted. I wanted to emphasize that for manufacturing operations for the drug product, process validation reports are not reviewed. However, we do expect that as part of our review, should there have been changes to process parameters, sampling plans, or IPCs, future validation exercises will be conducted to establish the commercial intended process moving forward. So finally, a few tips here to minimize review cycles. We expect complete and relevant information. Oftentimes there might be deviations or OOSs, and it really helps if there be a summary or a synopsis of the steps taken to address or the impact assessment for such events. It provides assurance to the reviewer that appropriate measures are in place. Relevant information, do look over the IR content carefully and respond accordingly. Consistent information, if you do update certain modules, make sure the information is done. Information updates are done across all modules for consistency purposes. Understand and meet regulatory expectations. I hope this talk has given you some feedback on regulatory expectations. And last but not the least, this is a call out to regulatory professionals that draft submissions. Do be mindful of agency feedback, and if at all possible, apply the learnings from one application to others. And this really would be instrumental and have a multiplying effect with regards to our review efficiency and turnaround. Last but not the least, I wanted to leave you with some high-level information about ongoing initiatives within the agency that are really designed towards ensuring we put forth timely, objective, consistent review recommendations. We work extensively in multidisciplinary teams in a very collaborative manner, and we are now continuing to maintain our interaction across multiple applications. We're bringing to bear very powerful and tailored informatic tools to gather knowledge across applications and assist in structured review. And this includes aspects related to facility capabilities. And last but not the least, we are progressing standardized training for reviewers to progress integrated process and facility assessment, along with appropriate considerations of when to involve subject matter experts through consults so that the most relevant, appropriate, and robust review recommendations are put forth. So to summarize, I wanted to leave you with a few thoughts. Common deficiencies are resolvable, but they do need your attention to detail, and they do need us to exchange relevant information and justification supported by science and risk-based analysis. There are multiple opportunities for clarification discussion with the agency, including mid-cycle TCONs, and a submission that demonstrates thorough understanding of product process implementation risk allows for robust product quality management. So moving on to the last challenge question. So a reference to support your process validation efforts prior to market launch would be A, quality agreement with the CMO, the contract manufacturer, pre-approval inspection compliance program, guidance for industry process validation, general principles and practices, or USP monograph for the product. Yes, you're right. Those of you that pick guidance for industry process validation, general principles, that is correct. This is something that you would reference as your product was approved and you were into your final validation exercises. Wanted to share some acknowledgements and leave the room open for questions. Thank you so much.